Hey guys, Bailey Wiki here, and we're looking at my Dungeon Draft instance. We're looking at a map here that I built in what was probably about 7 minutes altogether. And I'm going to show you how to do this yourself with this level of detail. Now, we're going to use my base assets pack, which has all of these very specially designed AI textures. I call them rich textures, that we are going to use as an assembly to create this map. You can see I've got, what's about 7 textures in play here. And with 7 textures, you can do all of this. And I've got some objects and some other things that I've dropped in. But I'm going to show you guys how to do this and how to do this really, really quickly, as well as how to do something like this. We're going to do this in this session as well. So just a reminder, you can create these yourself. You have to use them as tileable images. Otherwise, you're going to be constrained to the size of your canvas. And if you make them tileable and you do some other things, you may have to upscale them and do some other stuff. But once you get the textures in, you can build a really, really huge palette of stuff to then work with. And so I'm going to show you some tips on how to work and design with this type of toolkit. And we're going to really make some awesome things. And with those things, you can make like this rock's nest, right? Surrounded by clouds. You'll be able to make super interesting, beautiful, volcanic shorelines like you see here. Paths through various types of terrain, and a whole lot more. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to start by going to our terrain brush tool, and we're going to jump into Bailey Wiki base assets. And as I sort of navigate through these, you can see what we have to play with. A reminder that these are all tileable images, so if we change our canvas size, they continue to work. We'll see some repetition, but they're like 4K images, so the repetition is going to be relatively low. And what we want to do is just look at these different terrains, and we want to identify some sort of geographic landmark or texture that we want to sort of design around, right? Here's like a big crater, just to show you the variation. There's a lot in here that we can use as a starting point. I really like starting with some of these rocky textures because you get some of these great designs in them. There's a lot that we could do with something like that, for example. Okay, I like this because it looks like I could almost define a channel in here. So let's switch to a second brush, and I'm going to switch to a rocky brush. I just want to grab, it really doesn't matter too much which one I grab. I just want to kind of have it generally be part of the same palette. And if I start painting, you see it reminds me that I have to put on smooth blending. And what I want to do is I'm just looking at where the shadows are here, and I'm just going to eliminate one side of those shadows. And by doing that, I am creating essentially a flat area up top that then goes down. So let's do the same thing on this side. I want to keep that center piece in there. Really doesn't matter. You just Control Z anytime you do something that you want to undo. It's pretty easy and quick to do some of this stuff. And get rid of this. You see how you can just literally just paint over these things, and it gives you this cool effect, right? Okay, so now I feel like I've got this kind of gorge sort of defined through here. I want to re-expose some of this. Notice you just go back to the same brush and you can just kind of make things more exposed. So you see like where this is kind of faded, can just shrink my brush down, and this is kind of tip number 2. You shrink your brush down to the max. You can redefine some of these edges, or you can decide where if you have some kind of weird fading or something like that, you can just go back through it and give it a little bit more definition. Actually realizing I want this to feel like it's more of a drop off. So I'm going to bring this flat area all the way up to the edge, and you can see how it gives me that nice edge. Let's go ahead and commit. I like that. I feel like this is starting to tell my story, right? Now this technique also works with water. Let me show you what I mean. Let's make a new level. Let's turn on our train brush. There we go. And let's grab some water that looks like it might be close. Oh, this one's got animals in it. Just going to get any old water right now just to get these starting to blend. Like that. Show some of these rocks underneath. And then we can just tap these together and it starts to blend these a little bit more naturally. You can see just like that, we've created the illusion of what used to be a channel of water is now a cliff, right? So we can throw a boat on here. We can have all kinds of, interesting things going on in that little part of the ocean. Maybe I want to get rid of some of those rocks down below, right? Make it look like they're just a little bit more shallow, close to the shore. And now I've got a pretty believable, in quick order, map here. Maybe I want to define some sort of path coming through here. Then I just start changing my brushes and just seeing which one I like. So I kind of like this just rock path just sort of carving its way through. Bring back a little bit more definition for our cliff side here. Work on that transition. And remember, we're not going for perfect. It's not the point of this. We're going for fast with detail density. Remember, this map may only be used once in our entire campaign. I'd rather have a map that it's some oohs and ahs, even if it's not entirely perfect everywhere. Of course, you can make it perfect, right? I can take objects and I can start to overlay them over these transitions, right? And that's one of the techniques I'll show you. But all of a sudden, we've got, tactically speaking, we could have enemies up here firing down on both of these sort of areas. We could have a rowboat, up to the shore here. We could have a galleon parked out here, like just throwing prefabs and tiles down. And we've got a pretty spectacular map to start with. Let's go back to our previous map. And we're going to unlock some more spaces here. But I'm going to switch to another, I just pre-picked this out, Grass 08, because I want to vary up this terrain. I don't want this to be a rocky map. At least I want to have there to be, grass and some other things. I want to soften it up a little bit. So I'm going to take this Grass 08. It's already got all these details in it. I'm just spamming them around and seeing how they interact with what I've already got in place, right? And then I'll come down here. I'll make my brush a little bit tighter. And I'm just going to give some definition around the rocks and bushes and physical things that I don't want to be completely fading out, right? You can see, look how great it just sort of merges in with the rock of the other brush. It's just fantastic. Love it. Give some little definition here. Make sure that these are merging in a believable way. Like it. Look at that. You just couldn't create this kind of density without sort of some AI assistance. Now I've decided I have too many rocks here. I'm gonna flatten some of this out. So I'm just going with this regular sort of grass brush. It's got some shrubs and things like that, but it really lets me sort of define some flat areas. When I bring this into Foundry later, I'll kind of have this coming down into that little gorge. When I bring this into Foundry, I'm going to put prefabs of trees in here because I like to do my trees as prefabs, right? They come with overhead tiles already. I've got tons of them in my library, and it makes it really easy to make sort of those kind of interesting tactical elements. All right, so now I've got this nice flat area, right? I've got this sort of gorge defined in the middle, and that's just, 4 brushes. In quick work, I've got, a pretty good starting point for a map. The next kind of trick I want to show you is you can actually use, I have these like what I call chromatic brushes, right? So there's like an orange brush, purple. I've found myself using the white and the black quite a bit. Here's our black. I'm going to bring its intensity way down because you can see if I don't, it's really can quickly overwhelm things. I'm going to bring its intensity way down. And I'm going to make this gorge look a little bit deeper. And so I'm holding down my mouse and I'm just kind of painting around, give it a little bit more intensity. You can see the effect that I create really quickly. Because it's a brush and it's fading, you can see it fades and blends together super well, right, with the texture underneath it. And because it's focusing its intensity on the center of the circle, all of a sudden it's creating this effect like that gorge actually may be very, very deep, right? And then I can play around. Do I want a little, piece of land connecting them? Do I want to connect these with a bridge later? Just using prefabs, which is likely what I would do. Do this. Yeah, like that. And watch this. You can even if I just lightly paint this, you can see how it just paints in then a bottom. So if I decrease my intensity quite a bit, I can give just the suggestion that there's a bottom. Isn't that great? And by the way, you can use that same technique to sort of recolor a lot of things that you've done. Like let's say I want this to be a little bit more brown in color. I go to my brown paint and I can run over it. You will lose detail the more that you use that, but it works, pretty effectively, especially if you've got something like, if I wanted this rock to be a slightly different color, I can run over it with, and recolor it with that brush, and it works pretty well. This is particularly effective when you're working with water too. If I grab the sand texture, for example, I put it on low intensity, and I start to paint underneath the water, or I start to paint over top the water, it will start to give it this look like there's sand underneath there, right? Like it might be a little bit more shallow. Works really well when you've got like a beach, for example. Okay, now we're going to switch to something that I call decorative brushes. Maybe I want to have some trees, right? Increase my intensity or some overgrowth. So, I might draw some overgrowth over here. You just don't want this part of the map to be, accessible to players, right? Kind of like drawing in some of this overgrowth. I'm just choosing this one first, but let's see what happens when I change my brush to like jungle, for example. All of a sudden we've got, palm trees and jungle, and I would come in here, make my brush nice and small, and I would just explore the edges of this, right? I would just work on where one brush sort of transition to the next. But I've got some really, really great, palm trees and things now. Just as an example, but maybe I want that to be more of like a, like a deciduous forest, right? I can switch to that, and then I can go continue to refine with that brush. Let's also explore what happens in the middle here. What if we changed our black to something entirely different, like fog? This is starting to tell a completely different story now, right? We've got this sort of foggy interior, what could be happening. I've got a couple of different types of fog that I might want to play with. I could then color this fog with like, purple or something. Let's do green. Bring down our intensity. Now, whatever story we're telling, involving green fog. Isn't that cool? But maybe it's not fog at all. Right? And this is where the fun comes in with using these rich textures. Maybe it's a dry sort of riverbed. Yeah, filled with flowers. I don't know. Here we have it just filled with bones, right? Which this may be too many bones. We might want to take our brown rock and, paint over some of these, right? This is where storytelling comes in. And I just love going to any of these and switching to a different pattern and just seeing what emerges out of all this, right? Just trying different things. Like this mossy rock just gives it a very different look. What would a settlement look like, right? I could come in here and sort of give definition to these buildings, but, did this town have, a crack appear in the middle of it? Just by trying different textures, you really get an idea of something that you couldn't really have conceived of before. What would snowy look like? What if I made this entire thing sort of covered in snow? What if there were ruins around here, right? And again, just coming in and sort of defining where these ruins begin and end. It's super compelling. Trying out some of these other rocky terrains. Some of it works, some of it, not all of it does work in combination, but it's the exploration of the combination that's so fast that you can cover a lot of ground very, very quickly. Like this idea of a gorge kind of cut through the Badlands, right? Of course, once you're ready, remember this can be exported, and because there isn't anything on here that suggests a scale, it can be really any scale you want. You can make this a huge map or a very small one. That's why I like to put things like bridges in afterwards, because maybe I want the bridge, to have a certain scale against the rest of this, right? Maybe I want this gorge to be very, very, very wide, and players have to, really struggle to get across it. But I have a lot of different options for bridges that I can bake in, certainly here in Dungeon Draft, or I can do it in my VTT. But here we can also just start pulling in trees and canopies and doing whatever else we want to do to sort of dress this up. Again, I would put trees in VTT, but, really the sky's the limit as far as how you want to, dress this up and use the typical techniques, right, to cement these things, into the surroundings, right? And also use objects to help with transitions. So, right, if I want to put like bushes along here. Then, of course, if you have prefabs of buildings, I'll turn on my buildings pack, save and reload. There's a little home. Maybe we want to situate our home right here. Maybe there's a little magic shop right next to it. There, and just like that, we are done with a super usable map that really, minus the tutorial I was giving you, was probably a 7-minute job. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from it. Let me know in the comments how you get along with it. And if you have more ideas, I do have many, there's quite a few of these rich textures available today. I've got more coming in the future. For example, I've got a forest pack that's coming out. So I'm bringing lots of stuff for you guys to be able to do more and more things like this. And I'm also honing down the art style and other types of things that will help you make sure that sort of everything works together as much as possible. But my goal is just to give you the tools that let you design whatever your imagination is trying to design, but to do it very, very quickly and with enough detail that you can really impress your players without having to put the man hours into actually making everything pixel perfect. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks so much, and have fun making your maps.